Um, we're now live, which means anyone who is a subscriber to my channel is probably at this point wondering what the hell is their notification doing on a Saturday afternoon? Isn't he usually doing his show on a Sunday? What's going on? I know the world's upside down at the moment. Good God. Yes, I'm usually doing a show which is all about Comic-Cons, and basically it's my Talking Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego show on a Sunday. But this weekend I would have been at MCM Birmingham. It was the start of the MCM Comic-Con season for 2020. It was going to be their first big show of the year. And it was also going to be a great show as well for the new representation of comic art and artists in the Comic Village on stage, because we were going to be having a couple of sessions that were going to be presented on the live stage. As you can tell, the world's changed a little bit and things have gone a little bit topsy-turvy, which means we've had to take things online. So thank you very much indeed for taking part in MCM online with us today. And I'd also like to say thank you very much indeed to the gang at MCM Comic Con for allowing me to do this, because I did get in contact with a number of the panelists that I was speaking to and asking if they'd be interested in doing a live online session. A couple of them said yes, but we ran it past MCM as well. They were very gracious and said thank you very much indeed to them to allow us to do what we're doing here today. We are going to be talking to, let me just bring this up because at least then you can all get the idea of what the time table is for a little bit later on today. We are going to be talking to Craig Russo. We're going to be talking to him about the craft of creating original comics, which is going to be an interesting topic, especially in the new paradigm, the new landscape of where we are at the moment, but also just the idea of getting original ideas out onto the page and also get them out there to a wider world. So that's going to be cool. Also, we talked to J.K. Woodward as well. We had about a 35-40 minute conversation with him an hour or so ago. Great conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. Do go back and check us out on the channel. And of course, any comments, just let us know what you thought of it. But I had a great time. Great to talk to JK. So that was really fun. But we have ourselves a guest, which hopefully we're going to have a fair number of people watching and also a fair number of questions. We do have the Q&A on the YouTube channel. You can also comment on Twitter and also on Periscope as well. It does show up in the feed. We do keep a close eye on any incoming questions. Anything you want to put to Kit Buss, who's joining us. Hello, Kit. How are you?
Hello. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thank you. And are you managing, because I know that you kind of got the chance to see family today. Are you hunkering down at the moment, or are you just kind of being nice and cautious?
We're being super cautious. We've got a little bunker. It's me, husband, and cat, and we're being very well behaved. So
very good.
Just staying home, playing it safe.
Excellent. Well, I mean, it's great that you've joined us, and thank you so much indeed for taking part. We're going to get into a whole bunch of stuff, including Critical Role, obviously. But I want to go a little bit further back because perhaps maybe there are some people that don't really know about your art development and how you kind of got into your artwork. I mean, was it something that you studied at school, or was it something you did away from your studies, or how did that all come about?
It was both. My mother, if she was here, would recount one of her favorite stories, which is when I was, gosh, I must have been about 3 or 4. Apparently, I drew what she considers to this day to be an exemplary drawing of an elephant's butt, and she was just like, it was so realistic, it just captured something. And so I guess maybe from an early age I was obviously taking interest in art, and then it was always something that I loved doing anyway, but I followed it through school and through college and kind of kept up with doing the educational side of it. But I was always drawing in my spare time as well. It was one of those things that it just kind of if a bit of paper, it happened. So yeah,
fair enough. I mean, obviously then with that great comment from your mum, you're studying physiology and anatomy. Was it something, was it kind of something that you were drawing, like real work from the drawing from the real world, or was always high art, high fantasy? Sorry.
It was again, it was a bit of both. I think I probably started understanding the importance of using your references when I was in college, and when I was in university. I studied traditional animation at university, and they had life drawing courses and that kind of stuff, which was super important, and really helped me kind of level up and start understanding how important it was to observe when you were drawing. But as far as the high fantasy thing was concerned, my dad is a huge nerd, and very much the reason that I am the way that I am. And so he was reading me David Eddings and Tolkien and Philip Pullman and all this kind of stuff from when I was very small. So I kind of shared that, and the two kind of merged. So it was kind of, it's finding that balance, as I think a lot of artists who draw that kind of material do, of you've got your technical side of art where it's important to observe and to learn and to, you know, keep your hand in with anatomy and that kind of stuff. But in terms of the subject matter, it was always something that I loved anyway. So it was kind of a natural fit, I guess.
What were the kind of first names that really caught your attention in terms of the artists that you were studying and keeping an eye on? Was there any that kind of were always at the forefront of what you were looking at?
I mean, I loved a lot of the kind of best known illustrators of fairy tale books and that sort of thing, like Kai Nielsen, and I loved the artwork that was done for the Lord of the Rings films, which came out when I was kind of mid-teens, I think, slightly early mid-teens.
Good to see those guys getting recognized and
oh yeah, 100%.
showing up at conventions. And
yeah, it's really cool. I was at a convention not too long ago, and I think Alan Lee was there, and I sort of, it was like, be cool. But yeah, so it was kind of
did
like,
you succeed?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask, I think. I hope I did. But yeah, so kind of like fantasy illustrators that were in books that I was reading and stuff. But then also, as you do with educational art, I was looking at a lot of sort of classic 20th century artists that were a bit more kind of high art, I guess, like not illustrative, but more kind of painterly and that sort of thing. So Monet and Urte, and his name's going to escape me now. No, it's gone. It'll come back to me at an inappropriate moment.
No, it will come to you about 3 minutes after you've signed up on this. Yeah,
of course. And I think, oh, that was it. Yeah, and actually, in terms of just kind of an artist that I looked up to, who was a contemporary artist that I really admired their work and thought that's a benchmark that one day, maybe in the far future, I'll hit. Tracy Butler, who does Lackadaisy, which is currently kickstarting an animated short, which is amazing. I came across her work first when I was about 16. And we're mutuals on Twitter these days, which still kind of blows my mind. But I first came across her Martyrs of Inessa stuff, which she was doing before Lackadaisy, which was all high fantasy and very kind of historically based and that sort of stuff. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. And her characters are so expressive, and her line work is so detailed and so dynamic. And yeah, so I absolutely fell in love with that, and kind of thought, yeah, maybe one day I'll aim to get, you know, as close as I can to doing something like her work, because it's fantastic. So yeah.
What kind of format were you working in back then when you were kind of developing your art? Was it pen and ink, or was it paint? I mean, were you kind of, or were you just mixing it up?
I'm horrible with paint. I'm horrible with any kind of traditional medium that can go wrong. But mostly back then, I guess it was it was pencil and paper for a lot of years, and if I had to, then I was using paint and acrylics and charcoal and oil pastels and all the stuff that they make sure that you at least try in art class. And I don't think I started doing digital art until I was about 16 or 17 and started college. And I got hold of my very first Wacom tablet, and I was very excited because, you know, it was all brand new and drawing on the computer. What a thing. So yeah, I guess up until that point, like it was a lot of just pencils and coloring pencils and paper.
Well, I mean, I know that you were
yeah.
also a part of an anime society at school, so you were very much also into that very that Japanese style of animation, the thick lines and the strong black blocks of color, and the real strong dynamic work. I mean, how did that influence your work? Because that sounds like a strange fusion. Well, not strange, just a real dynamic fusion of the styles.
Well, I actually grew up in my teens. I was actually more into Western comics.
None of us grew up.
No, we hatched fully formed from eggs. When I was in my teens, I was reading a lot of X-Men and Western comics and DC and Marvel and Dark Horse and all that kind of stuff. And I used to read the Lara Croft comics. I used to go to the library and take them out and sit and read them. So I had more of an influence in terms of Western comics to start off with. And then again, like college was responsible for an awful lot where I'm concerned. I got to college and discovered anime and went, oh my God, this is amazing. So it was kind of a good fusion between Western and anime, and it all kind of like fused together, like the illustration stuff as well, and the classical art education and things. So it kind of became like a bit of a melting pot. But I think maybe these days, because my style kind of evolved really messily and as a hybrid, I think probably these days it shows more of its anime influences maybe. But it was just a case of like, as I went through and I was discovering, you know, different shows that I liked, or reading different comics or different books or whatever I liked, it kind of fed into it and made me go, oh, I really like the way they did that. So, yeah.
And then it's a case of breaking that down as well and kind of working out how that works. I mean, it's interesting that you actually were reading comics as well, because that's a real, you know, that sequential art and that they're telling a story in a panelist kind of fashion. But like you say, you studied animation, so there's that real sense of creating a linear story, which is always interesting. Very quickly, I do know that we've got a number of people who have joined us. Thank you very much indeed to MCM for retweeting the link.
Thank you very much.
If you do, indeed, if you do have any questions for Kit, jump in on the chat. We've got a couple that have come in already. We'll dive into those in a bit. But I think it's only fair then we'll well, no, there was one question I wanted to ask before we get into Critical Role, because it also fed into your studies and what you were learning in terms of that moment when you went, hey, I'm a proper professional artist. Can you remember that moment and what it was?
Oh gosh. I don't know. Well, this was the thing. When I graduated from uni, it took studying animation at uni to make me realize, oh, I'm not good at this. This isn't what I want to do. And through realizing that I wasn't good at animation, it kind of made me reevaluate a lot. And you know, obviously, you know, the precipice of adult life was looming beyond graduation. So I had to do some quick thinking and think, well, what am I going to do? What do I aim for now? And comics just became a really natural sidestep. It was something that I was familiar with. It was something I felt passionate about. And so, yeah, I was working professionally in comics actually right after I graduated. And I think probably the first time that I thought, oh, this is the thing, was by sheer luck and this is one of the main reasons that I would say if you're looking to get into comics or you're looking to get into any kind of creative field, networking is so important. The very first comic gig that I ever landed was with 3 friends. We'd formed a comic studio straight out of uni. And a friend of ours had been approached by Hat Trick Productions and Channel 4 to do an educational webcomic. And it was being written by Leah Moore and John Reppion, who are, for anybody who is familiar with the UK comics scene,
absolutely
big names. And they had basically approached our friend Emma Viacelli and said, we want you to be the artist on this comic. And at the time she was too busy, but she put us forward instead. So our very first gig, my very first gig working in comics, was under the incredibly nurturing wing of people like Leah and John, which was insane. And yeah, so at the time I remember that kind of coming together, and we went to Camden for like the launch party and stuff like that. And I was kind of standing there and I was thinking, oh, this is amazing. But
this is weird.
Yeah, very, very surreal. But yeah, I don't know if there's ever like any one moment where you suddenly realize, oh, I'm a pro now, because even now, like 10 years later, I still sit here and think, is this okay? Like still waiting to wake up. So yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, yeah, I follow enough artists, I speak to enough comic creators, and I try and follow as much as I can. Imposter syndrome is not something that is immune to any level.
Yeah,
so
everybody seems to get it. So
yeah, absolutely. Before we do dive into Critical Role, like I say, I wanted to just do that. But actually, this question will dovetail nicely into that. It's from Katie Louise. Thank you very much, Neve, for getting your question in. I'm curious how Kit started selling art and or growing a following. That's a big question, because obviously in today's landscape, social media presence is pretty much damn essential.
It is, yeah. I would say, in my personal experience so far, I think following carries maybe not as much, it doesn't carry as much clout as actual experience, nor should it, I think. But it certainly goes a long way to seeing whether to contributing to whether you get hired or not, I think, these days. So sure. But yeah, in terms of when I started selling art or growing a following, it's kind of 2 separate answers, I guess. I was selling art and I was doing commissions throughout uni and after uni, and kind of working as a professional artist. But in terms of growing a following, that really only started happening after Critical Role, because that was such that was a lightning in a bottle launch pad, and it was I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now without
that natural dovetail then into let's get into it then, because I mean I understand it was via Liam O'Brien that you first got involved with Critical Role. So how did that come about? Tell us about that.
So it sort of links back to the anime thing. As completely disconnected from art, I have always been an enormous nerd about voice actors. I've never wanted to be one. I'm just kind of super intrigued and in awe of what they do. I had a friend who was working as sort of the lead chaperone, one of the organizers for voice actor guests back in the early days of MCM. We're talking probably about 14 years ago now. And she stepped down and basically said to me, I know that you're into this kind of stuff. Do you want to take over? So I started volunteering as a kind of a gopher and a chaperone for voice actor guests at MCM. And through that, one of the guests that we had over was Liam, and I was a huge fan of his, mostly because of, I think, Wolverine and the X-Men at the time, but there were a bunch of other things as well. And it was just that over the course of the weekend, we got chatting and we hung out, and he was lovely, as everybody knows. And we just kept in touch afterwards, and he was incredibly supportive about my art and what I was doing and what I hoped to do. And did me a favor, got me a portfolio review with Joe Madureira, which was insane. So he just became a really good friend, and we just kept in touch. And then, however many years later, he got in touch and said, "I've got a D&D group at home with a couple of friends, and we'd like to get a commission done of our characters. Is that something you'd be interested in?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. That sounds fantastic." And then completely forgot about it. And nothing more was said until a couple of months later. I was working at MCM again, and we had Laura and Travis over. And through the course of conversation, we kind of realized that, "Oh, you're two of the friends from the D&D group," and they were like, "Oh, you're the artist that, you're Liam's friend."
Didn't get back.
Yeah. But yeah, and Travis at the time kind of said, we're looking at doing something with our home game. We don't know how it's going to go, but we're thinking of streaming it. Would you be interested in doing some artwork for us? And I said, yeah, that sounds great, and didn't forget about it that time. And he got back to me and kind of said, we need some. Oh God, there it is. It looks so old now. But yeah, he got back in touch and said, we need some broadcast artwork, we need character designs and all this kind of stuff. And I got an email and I got photos and description of each character, and I did the thing, and now the rest is history. So yeah.
Well, how much backwards and forwards did take part between those conversations and the final piece? And because at the end of the day, you've effectively designed created the design palette for all of these characters, which have now translated to comics and the animated series and all of this. So, I mean, how much freedom did they give you to create the world of critical? Well, I'm not going to say create the world of critical role. That's
just Vox Machina. But,
yeah,
it's Matt's brain is responsible for about 99%.
There you go.
But in terms of how much freedom they gave me a criminal amount of freedom, especially considering that at the time I was completely unknown. Like literally, it was a case of Liam had seen my work, and that was more or less it. There was back and forth in terms of they would give me a description. So the initial character descriptions I got through, this is my favorite story to tell, and probably some people watching this will have heard me tell this before, so please forgive me. When I got the initial email through with the character descriptions, it was quite a varied selection of information. So from Liam, I had about 3 paragraphs of very, very specific, detailed description that was like, Vax's hair is so long, he's got this many pouches on his belt, and he's about this tall, and etc., etc. And Laura's description for Vex was literally just make me look hot, which I mean, you can't really ask for better freedom than that. So yeah, so it was a case of they would kind of give me an idea of what they were looking for and what they wanted, and this was true also of kind of the later iterations of the designs as well. And sometimes, particularly with where Marisha was concerned, I would get a Pinterest board through, which was super helpful. And then it would be a case of drawing something and sending it back over, and I would get a round of amendments saying, can this be a bit more like this? Could you make this element a bit more like that, or keep this color, or more of this color?
Can you make me even hotter?
Yes. Exactly that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I would get that back and make the changes and then send it over again, and and get it signed off. And they were very, very supportive, and really gave me an amazing amount of freedom with the stuff that I did, and I learned a lot through doing it. And hence recoiling at that initial image, because it was such a steep learning curve.
I'm going to bring it back up. I'm sorry, but I am going to bring it back up. There we go. There we go.
I'm braced for it now. It's fine. But yeah, so
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, that initial design, then it really did set the design for the characters, and obviously there is a kind of underlying design structure for D&D because we
Yes.
got it from the books. We Telltale, we were there. We've got the books, and we know the general idea of what these what the world looks like. But this was something else. This was a creation of the Vox Machina adventure. How does it feel now to have been at the start of that, considering that it has now evolved into different media and
Sure.
the animated series, to have that initial piece of work kind of feed the rest of it? I can imagine incredibly surreal.
Yes, it does. It was, I mean, it was different back at the beginning because it was grassroots, and it was, I remember when it first started broadcasting and it started gaining a following, the community was small enough that we pretty much all knew each other. Like, we knew one another by name, and I made a lot of friends in those early days. Certainly people like Meg and Wendy, who have also worked as artists for the show. We remain, really close friends to this day. It was such a lovely community. And back at the beginning, nobody, least of all the cast, had any idea that it was going to grow into what it has grown into today. And I think it's amazing to see that it has, and that it's inspired, and it's, it holds a place of affection with so many people. But in terms of how it feels personally, I think because the cast did such an incredible job of embodying their characters and so much, and the storytelling, the meat of the story, that the thing that makes it so great is the product directly of them and of Matt. I think a good example is that I kind of, I think of the characters as being them. And the first time that my husband Matt came with me to an MCM, he kind of knew, like, he lives with me, he has to put up with it. But we went, and he hadn't really seen any of what was going on. And we were going across to the Critters meet, which happens at pretty much every MCM. And he suddenly grabbed my arm as we were walking across to the hotel, and he was like, baby, look, those are your designs. And there were a couple of cosplayers walking past, and it was kind of, for me, it's like, no, that's Vex, that's Percy. The character becomes it's a package. It's what the cast are doing with it.
I'm guessing there's
yeah.
also that sense of you have to give, because it's also because it's a commission as well. You have to give that art away, as in you have to kind of let that art then grow into its own world, which it has.
Yeah.
I mean, the Critters have absolutely embraced these characters,
Yeah.
embraced the designs, and I'm not going to say that you feel left behind, but you kind of see that world evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the best things is seeing all of the artists in the community. As you say, the fact that it's now been adapted into a bunch of different mediums. It's a comic, it's going to be an animated show soon, which is insanely exciting. It's like seeing how Olivia did the designs for the Origins of Vox Machina comic. I love it because you get to see each artist that takes it on. They put something of themselves into it. No two iterations of the design are exactly alike, and there's something individual to each of them. And I think that's great because, you're kind of seeing the artist's signature on them, and similarly with kind of seeing what the studio's doing with it for the animated show, and coming from an animation background, it's really interesting to see how the designs have been simplified or how they've been adapted and stuff. So yeah, like at the start, I did a thing, and I worked with the cast, and we put a thing together. But now it's out there, and it's grown, and it's its own thing now. It's become organic, which is really cool to see, and not like anything I've ever experienced before. So Yeah.
I can imagine. Well, I mean, that kind of leads into a question which Andrew has asked. I mean, I think we've pretty much covered it, but I'm going to kind of dovetail off it. Having started in animation, how weird is it to know that your character designs are going to be on Amazon? I think my question is, I mean, have you seen the Amazon character designs yet?
I have nothing to do with the animated show. So literally all I've seen of it is what everybody else has seen. So I do remember
that's going to be surreal.
When the Kickstarter went up and I watched the trailer for the first time, noises that no human has made before emerged from me. It's incredible, and it's very surreal. Again, I've used that word so many times. But yeah,
it's fitting. It works.
Yeah, but yeah, how weird does it feel? It's incredibly weird, and I'm very proud, and it's really cool to see that they've, I think it's very well deserved, and it's really great to see them succeeding and getting something like that. So yeah, really fantastic.
We'll get into where the show's evolved into a little bit further down the conversation, because obviously there's all the rest that's happened in the meantime. I mean, this community of artists that have grown and developed around Critical Role, and like you say, it's fantastic that has happened. Where did you first start seeing that take place? And was it at conventions? With, like you say, with cosplayers, or was it and other artists on behind the table, or was it like an online community first?
It was both. In terms of the online engagement, like I'm primarily a Twitter girl, so I saw it kind of popping up more on Twitter, and and you've got metrics there as well. You can see what the numbers are and what the audience numbers and the views and that kind of stuff are. But in terms of the conventions, I remember the very, very first Critical Role Critters Meet at MCM, the very first one ever, and I think there were probably about 30 of us, and we all gathered, and all being, a bunch of nerdy, shy introverts, kind of stood around until I, in the most awkward way possible, took the initiative, and we all kind of sat around like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and we were just kind of, like, so, what does everybody like about the show? And, it was really nice to see so many people kind of just coming together, and I guess seeing that meetup get bigger every time as well, and realizing, oh, wow, people are really getting into this. This is spreading. I think kind of it was like a snowball, and you saw it happen in person and online both. So yeah.
Well, I mean, we can talk about the numbers. I mean, the first stream had 2,000 viewers. Campaign 2, episode 1 had 125,000 live viewers. We've seen the community grow. I mean, I for myself was at MCM London as a panel host in 2018. In the November, the first time that I think it was the first time that no, it was the summer one. It was the one where Frank Miller was there, and Jimmy Palmiotti. And for myself, I was thinking, yes, all these amazing American artists,
absolutely,
they're going to be the star of the show. And then we saw this queue, this line snaking around Comic Village, and it was all heading towards your table. That must have been quite mind-blowing. I mean, what was that like to experience?
It was, the entire weekend was a fever dream, and it was entirely unexpected. And it was also, that particular show was was the launch of Cloven, which is the comic that I do that's based on Lilith, who I played in season 1 of Critical Role. So it was the launch of that, and I had been incredibly anxious about, are people going to be interested? And only to be, it was kind of that reaction gif of No Face from Spirited Away getting overwhelmed by the way it feels. It was like that. The community just turned out in force because the cast was there, and not only that, but like coming to Comic Village and stopping by the table and stuff. And it was, mind-blowing is the right word. It was really incredible. So,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I was also going to talk about that invitation to star as a guest playing Lilith on the show. The first non-actor to be a guest player on the show.
No pressure.
No pressure. I mean, I'm only guessing you played D&D before, so you weren't exactly going in blind, but
No.
these are some master storytellers. So, yeah, how was that experience?
Terrifying. It was good fun. I'd played D&D before. Not to name drop, but my very first DM ever was the Mark Humes of High Rollers. You know, we go way back.
Fair enough.
So that was it. No, I had been well prepped in terms of like, you know, playing and knowing kind of how it worked. I don't think no, I lie. I had played a bard, so I had dealt with spellcasting. But yeah, I mean, the knowledge alone that you are being broadcast to an audience, case in point, terrifying. But that being said, they are such good role players, they're such good improvers, they're such good actors, and they're such good storytellers that I only had about 5 minutes to be nervous, and then I was in there and I was into it. Wow. and you know, and everything else just vanished, and it was a really great experience. That being said, the fact that episode was the one, or one of the first ones, I think, where Vax chose to almost die at the hands of the Briarwoods in the first half of the episode, and I was sitting backstage just like, don't die, please don't. Nobody's gonna care if a guest comes on in the second half. If Vax dies in the first half, don't do it. I can't follow that. So Fair enough. Fortunately, it worked out.
Fair enough. Well, that kind of also talks about then the reaction of the fans, the critters, and we kind of talked about that community of artists as part of the critters, but also the online audience, which has grown and developed pretty much from day one. They're they're incredibly passionate. They're a very giving community, but they're also very protective of the worlds that Critical Role creates and the characters they present. As a big
sorry.
Don't worry about it. Has there been any? I'm not going to say pushback because there is such a positive community, but has there been any kind of like conversation with the fans which has really represented how powerful and passionate that community is?
I guess with pretty much any fandom these days, like people feel very passionately about things that they love. And I think like my experience of the community has been pretty much wholly positive. It amazes me. I get people coming up to the table who just, you know, I worked on the show and I can't quote it chapter and verse the way that these people do, which I think is phenomenal. And seeing people get so passionate, and like the number of people that have said it's inspired them to start playing D&D themselves or try DMing, or even like in terms of artists and writers and kind of people that do creative stuff themselves, the number of people that have said, you know, this has inspired, like it's made me want to start a comic about my D&D campaign, or, you know, it's got me back into drawing again, or writing, is fantastic. So yeah, I think just in terms of like how passionate and how giving the community is, and how they always rise to the occasion, you know, whenever there's something like a Kickstarter or there's a charity drive or anything, any kind of thing that requires support, the community is just there, which I think is just, you know, it's remarkable. And certainly, as far as I'm concerned, you know, again, I wouldn't be able to do this without that community. So I'm incredibly grateful and very humbled by it.
Fair enough. Then it comes to that question then of how much you have to have a little bit of a distance from that community in order to just kind of do the work, as it were, to just kind of like muscle down and just crack on. Because I can imagine that there is that sense of not an impending shadow. I'm really trying to make them sound like this god-awful army that's coming over the horizon. They're really not. But yeah, that sense of you have to have your own space to do the work that you do. Is
Yeah.
there a sense of you have to go, okay, I have to just
Mm.
create a distance, a bit of a disconnect?
I think as far as like my particular role in relation to it is concerned, with something of the nature of Critical Role, I mean, obviously, like my art is one representation of these characters. So this ultimately what this is, it's a campaign played by a group of actors who are improving and acting out the characters with no visual. So it stands to reason that with an audience that large and a community that large, not only do you sort of have the thing of people are all going to see characters slightly differently because you're imagining it at the end of the day. So, you know, I did the work for the show, but that doesn't automatically mean that everybody out there is going to look at what I drew and go, yeah, that's definitely, you know, that's my headcanon kind of thing. Like everybody's going to picture it differently. And even more importantly, the people want to see themselves reflected in characters and media that they care about. They want to see themselves represented. And so again, what I'd come back to is the beauty of having a community, a very diverse community of artists who, I guess, essentially, you know, on campaign one, made up for my shortcomings of being one person who has one particular outlook and one particular, you know, I guess, set of privileges and life experience. And you have this massive community of artists who each interpret the characters differently, who draw them differently. So yeah, I think as far as kind of being a pro and getting the job done, I was working with the cast and kind of doing, you know, I had creative freedom and I was drawing what I was picturing, but also at the beginning, for example, one of the things that was said was, can the characters look, you know, somewhat resemble their players? So that was the direction that I went with and adhered to. But then, you know, I'm not going to please everybody, and so having to kind of accept that, like, not everybody's going to like what I do. And fortunately, I've been incredibly lucky in that, as I say, my experience with the community has been wholly positive, and I've seen nothing but support and people being really complimentary and very positive about it. But yeah, I guess there's that kind of thing of, like, if you're interpreting something that's imagined, and if you're given a specific direction, or, you know, if you're just working to your own imagination, you're not going to please everybody. And so having to accept that and get on with it. But then also it makes me appreciate more seeing that there are other people who are producing work and interpretations of the characters that are different from mine. And I think that's really cool to see. And I think it's really important. So, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Where is the lifeblood of the Critical Role art community at the moment? Is it Tumblr? Is it
it's all over the place?
Is it all over the place?
It's all over the place. I've seen it on
Instagram.
Instagram.
How difficult is it to keep a track on everything?
Like, oh God, I don't. I just see really beautiful stuff cross my dash. I follow a whole bunch of artists from the community. I'm finding new ones all the time, and I'm seeing incredible stuff get retweeted or show up on my Instagram dash or whatever. And it's amazing. And just, I can't even keep track. The community is so big now, especially with campaign 2 as well. And like, Ari's designs are just to die for. And seeing like the fan art that's come out of that and stuff is, it's phenomenal.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, I think then we can kind of head towards the kind of where we are at the moment in terms of Critical Role. I mean, what are your feelings now on how far Critical Role has developed, not only in the breadth of story that they're telling, and the stories that they tell, but also behind the camera, how they've evolved into this particularly powerful commercial entity with some rather large numbers being bandied around.
Absolutely.
How do you feel, and how's your relationship with Critical Role developed with that in mind?
I mean, I'm friends with the cast. Like we keep in touch. And yeah, like I am incredibly proud for what that's worth. And I think nobody is more surprised that where they've ended up than they are. They are honestly some of the most genuine and above board people. They're really, really, they're just, oh, they're genuinely
It's
really,
okay.
sorry.
You've had that surprise. I've got a cat that's just jumped on the table.
Oh
So
no, it's all good. We've got some Neo 2 going on in the background. Yeah, they're, I'm from a personal point of view, like I think it's amazing and it's really cool to see them doing so well. In terms of like the clout that Critical Role now wields, it's, I mean, it's practically intimidating. And I, you know, hats off to Matt and Liam and Travis and the rest for being at the helm of this behemoth. I think it's really amazing how many people it's got into D&D and how it's kind of helped to bring it back. And also not just that, not just D&D, but also to get more people into tabletop in general and to see, you know, to I guess break stigma and kind of see you know, how great it can be in terms of just a social thing to do with friends, or how it helps build confidence or communication skills. There's like a whole raft of different benefits, I guess, that it has. So yeah, and in terms of like seeing it go, it's yeah, it's remarkable and again very humbling and intimidating and yeah,
I think
words.
I think I've also been really impressed by how they've kept it very much the core crew. It's the group that started this journey, and they've not kind of developed into. Can I help you, young man? What the hell? Oh yeah. Yes, he's someone wants feeding desperately.
They always do.
They always do. I think, yeah. So I mean, it's a case of there's this core group that started on the journey, and they've supported themselves and supported each other, and they haven't kind of gone Nerdist or another group. I don't know. I just picked a name off the top of my head there, and just turned into this, like you say, this very intimidating kind of corporate level thing. It's more of it's still at the end of the day, it's a group of very good storytellers telling stories, and I think that's very encouraging.
Absolutely.
Okay. One last question I think we've got from Andrew Dickinson, and then I think I've got one more for me, and then we'll let you get off. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
No worries.
This is regarding your own work, and it's So You Self-Publish. Was there any opportunity to take Cloven to an established house, or was it always your intention to go it alone? That sounds very
yeah, that makes me sound a lot braver than I am. My feeling on it was that Cloven is it's a passion project. It was a story that I wanted to tell. I mean, I'd been wanting to get back into doing comics for a while, and then I was fortunate enough that I had enough interest from people kind of saying, well, you know, Lilith was only in one episode, we want to, you know, what was the backstory, what happened to her afterwards, and the fact that people were interested gave me an opportunity to be able to say, okay, well, this could be a story that I tell through a comic. And it's one of those things where I kind of wanted to see if it would work first. So my feeling was, you know, I want to be able to do this and tell this story the way that I want to do it, without the risk of, for want of a better word, I guess, being interfered with, or rather, that makes it sound arrogant. I wanted to be able to do it without having to worry about kind of wondering if I should take the story in a certain direction, you know, to think about the metrics over this is the story the way that I really want to tell it. And so I think at the moment, you know, I'm fortunate enough to have a really great printer in Comic Printing UK. The quality of his stuff is fantastic, so it certainly doesn't lack in terms of like the physical editions. my husband Matt has come on as co-writer and has enormously bolstered the quality of the writing for that. I'm very lucky that I've got a kind of a little working setup that at the moment seems to be fulfilling exactly what I want it to do. Further down the line, once it's kind of, that was the other thing, was I wanted to make sure that people were actually interested and see if it was going to sell, which is always the anxiety with doing self-published stuff. I've been very fortunate in that so far people have very graciously maintained interest and it's still selling, and I'm kind of blown away by that. But, you know, further down the line, with enough proof under my belt, it could be really good to go to a publishing house and pitch it. You know, who knows? That would be amazing. So I'm hoping to look at doing a Kickstarter for the very first collated edition of it, of the first 5 or so issues later on this year. So I think, yeah, that's my goal for the moment. But at the moment, self-publishing seems to be working out okay. But who knows?
Absolutely. So, yeah. And I think just to wrap things up then, because obviously all of this is, it's all the stuff that you're getting involved in and all your artwork and all the stuff that you do. Let's talk about, just to wrap things up, things you do to relax. Do you still D&D? And
yes.
Do you still get to play? How often do you get to play? And
I get to play, I'm playing currently in a Saltmarsh campaign that runs every other week. And our DM is a first-time DM, and she's knocking it out the park, and it's amazing. And yeah, we play every other week, and it's really good fun. My character
is that often enough?
Yeah, it is actually for me. Yeah, because it's I like every week would be great, but I think when you try and get any number of adults over, like more than 3 adults at a time, even that is difficult. It's like herding cats. But yeah, my character's an amnesiac, so, and we're starting to get into the backstory meat now, so it's a good roller coaster at the moment. So,
excellent, yeah. Excellent. Well, Kit, thank you very much indeed for taking part in this. I really appreciate
so much.
it. I know it was a little bit last minute, but we kind of pulled it together because I know that we wanted to get something for MCM, and it's great that they're doing MCM online, but it's also great that we've been able to represent the comic artists and the artists from Comic Village in our own way as well. Thank you so much indeed for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really good fun.
Good. If you want to just tell everyone what's going on in terms of where people can go to find out more about what you're doing and what you're up to.
Absolutely. So you can find me on social media under Anemone Tea. It's the same on Instagram and on Twitter. I have a website as well, which is anemonetea.com. I have a store there. There are comics, there are Critical Role prints. I am planning to put some new stuff up there soon. Issue 4 of Cloven is currently in production and should be out in the next month or so. As with everybody at the moment, with the difficult situation of freelancing in this climate, it is especially appreciated, even more than usual, if comics and prints go and that sort of thing. So if you would drop me a visit, that would be amazing. But yes, otherwise you can catch up with me on social media and keep up with me there. So, yeah.
And hopefully a Comic-Con and MCM a little bit further down the line.
Absolutely. Yep, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. We've got the events planned for later on in the year.
We do. The willpower is there. The willpower is there.
Absolutely. For myself, you can follow me on Englishman SDCC. I am doing my best to ramp up my coverage of San Diego Comic-Con as we get closer to July, depending on how that plays out. But I also do my live show on a Sunday, which is Talking Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego, where we get a brew and we talk about the things that is happening in the world of comics, Comic-Cons, and the things that distract us at such events. So please do join us on a Sunday evening. From myself and from Kit, and of course, if you are following MCM online, from everyone at MCM Comic-Con, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much. Okay. Bye.